and gentlemen, thank you for holding and welcome to the NetSuite Demand Planning Demo Web Seminar. Please continue to stand by and your seminar will begin shortly. You'll remain on music hold until your web seminar begins. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by and welcome to the NetSuite Demand Planning Demo Web Seminar. Before we begin, I must advise you that today's web seminar is being recorded and that all participants are currently in a listen-only mode. Our presentation today will be followed by a question and answer session. And to submit a question to the presenter, please type it into the Q&A panel at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and click the send button to submit your question to the queue. Finally, if you experience any technical difficulties during today's web seminar, please press *0 on your telephone keypad or send a chat message to web support. Now, without any further delay, I would like to hand the conference over to your speaker today, Phil Gunn. Please go ahead, Phil.
Thank you, Kath. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending this WebEx demonstration around NetSuite Demand Planning. Just to introduce myself, my name's Phil Gunn. I'm a solution consultant with NetSuite, which means really I work with existing and potential new customers of our solution. I'm aligned to the manufacturing, distribution and retail vertical within NetSuite, and having been in ERP for a number of years, working both as a pre-sales consultant and also helping customers implement ERP, prior to that I had various roles in manufacturing and distribution companies. So really the objective of today is to provide an overview presentation of NetSuite Demand Planning, with a view to making you aware of the capabilities of the module within NetSuite and thinking about how it may be able to help your organization. So the benefits really around demand planning are all around matching the demand of your business with the actual supply. So getting your demand and supply in balance, helping you minimize your inventory holding, and while maintaining your customer service standards. Initially, I'm just going to talk through the agenda for the WebEx, As mentioned earlier, if there are any questions, please put them through on the Q&A box that you have on your screen. At certain times I may answer them as we go along or later on in the process. But rest assured, if we run out of time, there will be capability for us to take a note of any outstanding questions and get back to you outside the WebEx. So initially, after the introduction, we're going to go into the software, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can create demand plans with NetSuite. So how can we forecast the future demand for the products that you may sell, and how we can generate those forecasts. Then we'll look at the supply plan. So what rules can you put in place that will help you generate a realistic supply plan that you can execute? So most of you will be using NetSuite purchase orders at the moment. How does the planning side of NetSuite interact with those purchase orders to effectively close the loop from the planning side of the business right through to execution? Later on in the demonstration, I'll be talking a little bit about manufacturing. So if you're a manufacturing organisation with bill of materials, slightly different scenario where you have demand at the parent items typically, and you want to blow that demand down to the individual components that make up your finished product so that you can effectively raise the purchase orders within the right time scale to make the actual assemblies or manufactured items. Also, demand planning has distribution requirements planning capability. So if you're in a situation where you have retail outlets or distribution branches, they may be supplied from a main hub warehouse in your organisation. So NetSuite can help you generate transfer orders with the right quantities and the right timing to make sure that your retail outlets or distribution outlets are replenished to the right level. Then we'll be rounding off the webinar with any questions and answers, and also closing comments. So initially I'm going to begin just by a quick recap of the replenishment order creation options that are within NetSuite already. So at any time we can go into the software and raise a purchase order or a work order to create some supply within NetSuite. There's also the capability to raise purchase orders back to back with a sales requirement. So you may be aware that we can flag an item as having special characteristics or indeed be a drop shipment. So in these cases, as the sales order comes in, the back-to-back purchase order will be raised both from the special point of view where we receive the stock before we ship it out, and also a drop shipment capability where the supplier will deliver directly to the customer on our behalf. Some of you may be also aware that within the inventory management part of NetSuite, we have reorder point control. So what that means is that we can establish a reorder point for a particular stock item, put a quantity in, and when it drops below that quantity, we can trigger a purchase order recommendation, which again can be implemented through a workbench screen where you can actually decide which of the recommendations you want to carry out. Incidentally, that reorder point can also be a dynamic reorder point. So as you have more demand for the product, it can mean that your reorder point level can increase in line with that, again with the safeguard to make sure that you don't run out and that you have sufficient supply of that particular product. So all those options are available to you within core inventory and also advanced inventory when I refer to the dynamic reorder point capability. So what demand planning does, it's another module in NetSuite, and what this does, it enables you to create a forecast of future demand in future time buckets. This can be statistically generated, so it can look at the past history of what your sales have been, what the demand has been, and then forward, or it could be more judgmental forecasting, where effectively you decide what the forecast is going to be and record that on NetSuite. Or it can be a bit of both. So typically you might get a system recommendation and then you override that with some of your market knowledge as to what the forecast should be. So by creating that forecast demand, you create a picture of what the business is going to sell, what the demand is going to be in future time buckets. That can then be followed by a supply plan where effectively you're taking that demand plan and looking at the impact of that on your supply situation. So for some of the stock items, you may already have stock, but others you may need to order that stock, and that stock may need to be ordered ahead of the demand. Does is really enable you to record a forward view of demand, and then to blow that forecast through a planning engine, which then provides you with recommendations of what you may need to buy in if it's a supplier manufacturing or assembly situation, or indeed what you may need to transfer if you're looking at a retail situation when you're looking at moving stock from a main distribution centre to a retail outlet. So the scope of what I'm going to be covering is around the demand planning capabilities. And how does that fit into a broader process within NetSuite? So this flowchart diagram here gives an idea of really what NetSuite is doing. If you look at the top screen now on the purchasing side, NetSuite has a 360-degree view of the item. It will hold all the details of the demand history and any purchase orders that are in place at the moment or supply work orders. It will hold details of the stock holding, and from that information then, using demand planning and supply planning, the system will calculate the supply. So it will recommend to you what kind of supply orders you need to be raising, and from those recommendations you can create a purchase order directly in an integrated manner. Once you've created the purchase orders, then they can go out to the suppliers through your existing methods, perhaps through email or EDI or through fax or other methods. They can be approved before that, and then they'll follow a receipt process, being put away in the warehouse. The invoice will come and be matched, and ultimately those invoices will be paid. So the planning side is fully integrated with the procure-to-pay side of NetSuite and the financials. So what I'm going to do now is to move into the actual software, and I'm sitting in the dashboard user interface of someone who's involved with procurement and the supply chain. So it's a planning manager. We've got, as you can see, we have some key performance indicators. We have a special navigation portlet where I can go into things that I might be interested in. And I've got a shortcut menu here where I can quickly access information within NetSuite. Some reminders there tell me some things to focus on. So I've got some visibility of what I've been needing to order, what's receiving, some price changes. So I think you're probably all familiar with visiting customer with sort of layout of the dashboard, some graphics around supplier spend, vendor performance, and our inventory level trends there. It gives a flavour of how a home dashboard for a planner, what that might look like. So what I'm going to do first of all is we're going to have a look at some of the history of what the demand has been for some products in the past. So I'm going to open up this demand history by item report. This is a standard report, and immediately this brings up an idea of, on a year-to-date basis, what we've already sold. So we can look at this category of phones or general electronics or tablets. So again, depending on how your products are organised, information will be displayed in different subheadings here. So we can see that on the Panasonic phone here, we've sold two. asked whether we want weekly or monthly time buckets. So increasingly, a lot of the people that I work with tend to be working on a weekly basis. They're doing planning every week, so they can be more responsive. So I'm going to set that to a weekly, but obviously, if you want to do that on a monthly basis, you can do. And another couple of questions it's asking me are the number of months that I want to present forward. So I'm going to try and generate a forecast for 20 weeks ahead of now, so go right into the future. And the historical analysis allows me to say, well, how far do I want to go back? So what I could say there is I want to look at 15 weeks of history, and this will then be used to create a forecast going forward for 20 weeks. You'll notice that at the bottom half of the screen, what I have is a series of products that I'm going to run the demand plan for, and NetSuite enables you to customize the screen here so that you can actually put in different filters here that you may want to use so that you can actually see different maybe categories or product groups that maybe different people are responsible for. In this case, I'm just going to be running this for phones in this case, but this is very flexible here, the filters that you can put on. So I'm going to mark all these for generate the forecast. And before I hit the submit button, just draw your attention to the fact that we can use another item's history as a basis for an item's forecast. So think of the capability, the situation where you have a new product coming in. You know it's very much like one that you've had already. The new product hasn't got any sales history, so you want to now use that history from a similar product as your history for the new product, and effectively then we can do that setting up in here that will actually use that history for a similar product. So all the user needs to do now is submit that to calculate the demand plan. It's just asking me if I want to overwrite what I already have, which I can do, and it will go away and it will calculate all the demand plans that I've selected. So let's have a look at some of these. If I go into the Panasonic display phone just to view those, and I'm just going to change my time bucket so that we're looking at August onwards. So what we can see here now is a weekly calculated quantity, takes the sales history that we had for the product, brings it forward into the future, but we have a forecasted quantity. So again, we could use that directly into the supply plan, but maybe now I want to go in and make some adjustments. Maybe I think the forecast is a little bit too conservative, and I want to start to raise some of these forecasts. Maybe to reflect some seasonality that we're having over the next few weeks and months. And that can be saved. So effectively what I'm doing now is I'm overwriting the generated forecast. It keeps a record of what the system's generated and then has also the overridden amount there that it will use to calculate supply. And incidentally, with a lot of businesses, maybe the history isn't going to be a good source of information for the future. It may be that the forecast has to be done on a judgmental basis. So these screens that I'm showing you here, you can import forecasts directly in from Excel. So whether you work offline in Excel to generate forecasts, share them amongst people in your organisation, you can then have a spreadsheet with all the information in the product level forecast going out into the future in the time bucket, and then you can bring that into NetSuite to be used in supply chain planning. So having created a demand plan, let's look at how NetSuite can help generate a supply that's going to match with that particular plan. So I'm going to show you the item 360-degree view. It's the item record in NetSuite. So here I've got some of those phones that we were talking about a little bit earlier. And I'm just going to scroll down and pick the Panasonic phone display here, and just we'll have a view some of the information set up against that product. So if I go to the inventory management tab here, the key thing here is that we've set this up to be a time phase product. So we have options of reorder point or time phase. Time phase switches on this demand planning capability that we're talking about this afternoon. Once we've switched that on, we can generate forecasts for the item, but then in order for it to be able to calculate a supply recommendation, we need to give the system various rules, and these can be quite powerful in determining the outcome of your supply plan. So we're focused on the London branch today, which is the top row here on the locations tab. We can see that we've already got 60 in stock, and we can see also that there's a lead time of 5 days on that. So it takes us 5 days to actually, once we've raised a purchase order, we need to allow 5 days for that product to come in. Moving further across here, that you can see we can set a safety stock level. So what that means is that you can always ensure that you have stock of certain products, and planning will respect that by always making sure that you're covering your safety stock. Moving further across, we've got the lot sizing method. This is pretty important when ordering from suppliers or maybe creating work orders from manufacturer. You want to make sure that those order quantities are sensible. So here we've got that set as periods of supply, monthly. So what that means in this setting is that it will look at what demand there is over the next monthly time bucket, and it will create a purchase order recommendation or work order recommendation just for that period. Whereas if we look at another branch, as we look further down my settings here, lot for lot means that if we need a particular discrete quantity of 112 for a particular date, the system will generate an order for 112. Other capabilities allow us to do a fixed lot size. So if we need 112 with a lot size of 50, it will round up to 150. So some of these settings make quite a lot of difference on what the supply plan is going to tell you, and the volume of purchase orders that are going to be suggested. Obviously with the periods of supply, that's going to leave you less purchase orders potentially generated with your suppliers than a lot for lot method. Further across to the right, we can see the supply type. So this can be purchased for a purchase order, or it can be a manufacturing, a work order supply, where effectively you're going to be building the item with your internal resources, or it could be a transfer when one branch is going to be supplied from another branch in the network. Some other important parameters across on the right-hand side are around the demand source. So do you want it to look at the demand plan only, or do you want it to look at the demand plan plus sales orders? Do you want to look at the demand plan minus sales orders, or do you want it just to look at sales orders? So behind each of these boxes, there's choices over what the system will interpret for this particular item at this particular location in terms of what demand it sees. And then further to the right-hand side, we've got some other settings. There's some time fences which control effectively protection of the plan. So if I'm a planner and I want to set my plan up and I have a time fence of 10 days, what that means is that the system isn't going to try and disrupt my plan and reschedule things within that 10-day window. It's going to push things out. It might tell me that it's done that, but it won't actually move things around within that window. Because you might already have purchase orders or work orders sitting out there, outstanding, if the demand plan changes, you may want to reschedule those orders. So there's some parameters on how far you can reschedule those in and out, which basically gives you control over if you want to leave, if a purchase order is going to be coming in within a certain 5-day window, you might not want to reschedule it, but if it's outside that, then you want capability to reschedule it. So all these planning rules feed into an engine that when we run the supply plan, it will look at these rules and work out effectively how best to recommend the supply plan going forward. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to move from some of the setup information to actually run a supply plan. So I'm going back to my home page, and I'm going to use the shortcut to generate the supply plan. And this opens up a screen, again with a number of settings on. I can control what subsidiary and location that I'm looking at. So again, depending on my security and my setup, I I can run this planning for different locations. Over on the right-hand side, I can determine what the start date of this plan is, and actually having a date in September is too early for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that planning date up right into the new year, so I'm going to be looking at till the end of February to generate my planned orders for. And again, rather like the demand planning capability, I can set up different control over what I see. So that's now told me that it's gone and created my supply plan, so it's basically happened. And again, if I look, you can see it's generated purchase order rep till the end of the period that I've specified. What you'll notice here is it's only generating me one purchase order per month, so that period orders to cover the demand requirements for that next bucket of a month. If I change tack and have a look at another item here, display phone, you can see this one, we're generating a lot more purchase orders here. This one's been set as a lot for lot type rule. In a week, it will generate that demand with quantities to create more frequent purchase orders, but effectively then you're having, you're pushing your cash flow out by having smaller purchase orders. And if you look at the iPad, again, we've got another lot for lot setting in terms of generating requirements forward. These are only recommendations. a lot for lot. So we've got small buckets, small weekly purchase orders, small weekly demand going forward into the future. You notice on this particular product we've also got a safety stock level. Remember I talked about the fact that the planning system will always try and preserve you with that safety stock level. So here we've got a safety stock of 10, and if you notice on the quantity on hand projected into the future, it never goes below 10. So the idea is it's always protecting that safety stock because that's in the parameters that you set up. So this growth requirements inquiry really gives a forward picture of both your supply and demand and tells you where you have problems. But what it's trying to do is always trying to maintain your quantity on hand such that you have enough product to meet your demand. Anything that the system thinks it should be rescheduling, or whether it anticipates a problem where you're going to get a stock out, NetSuite will will generate warning messages, and they can be configured to actually pop up on your dashboard. So for example, maybe you need some stock on Monday, the lead time for the product is 10 days, you've got to do something else to expedite that lead time, or use another source to actually make sure that you don't have a stock out. So we've looked at some of the capabilities of creating a demand plan on the system. We've looked at how you can then use that to generate a supply plan, and how all those different settings on the item master have a role in determining what happens with that supply plan. The next stage really is how we execute against that plan, which is all really about how we release those purchase orders to the suppliers, how we release those work orders if it's a manufacturing situation to the shop floor, or how we release a transfer order if it's a situation where one part of the organisation needs to supply product to another part internally within your company. So in order to actually convert the recommendations into a purchase order or another kind of work order, we have a workbench called the Order Items Workbench. And this again is very much a filter-driven workbench which will take your recommendations and can convert them into purchase orders to be executed. So initially here, at the top of the screen, I'm going to choose the location that I'm buying for. I'm going to choose the time window. So I'm interested in really anything that I should be raising orders for today. Maybe I want to just see up till the end of September to see what it recommends me to order. And then looking at the filters here, I could vary by a particular vendor and look at all the requirements for a particular vendor. I can put in some minimum quantities that I only want to look at particular quantities. I can also choose to look at everything or just items with preferred vendors. So in the main body of the screen here, we can start to look at the requirements. This is a way now we can convert the recommendation into a purchase order. So you can see here we've got an order that we should be raising in September time frame, that we need to come in October. We can see there that the product, we can see the description, we can see there the vendor that's been defaulting in. So some of you will be aware on the item file we have a preferred vendor list, and we can flag the one that we prefer to buy that product from, but obviously with the right authority here you could override that, so product could be replaced by somebody else. Incidentally also, if you're using advanced procurement, that can bring in contract details automatically as a default, so you can choose a contact, and it also brings in the quantities recommended directly from the planning. So again, there's capabilities to override those values here if you decide that you want to up that value. Capability to override the price, so it's going to bring in the vendor price automatically, or the contract price if you're using contract. So again, setup is key to this to make sure that when you actually release the quantities, you're really just concerned with the supply chain aspects rather than looking at pricing and choosing suppliers. The more you can set up in advance, the better. So what the user can do here is just going back to the right-hand side of the screen, so the left-hand side of the screen, I can choose what items I want to release from here. So I can say, well, actually, I want to release these particular items. And what will happen here, when I submit these orders, doing a running total here, it will now generate me a purchase order incorporating these items. So again, if I did mark all, it would work out what needed to go to Croda, what needs to go to Granger. So by filtering this screen initially, by working through the recommendations, you're not having to rekey anything. You're bringing information directly from the planning, running it into execution. And rather than like some of the other planning screens, if you use the Customize button here, you can actually set up lots of other filters. So if you've got particular product groups or categories that you might want to run in different ways, you can restrict what the user sees on the screen rather flexibly in that particular way. So hit the Submit button. This is when I'm asking the system to go away and generate me a purchase order. I'm only generating it for Croda in this particular case. It'll just take a few seconds. Looking for the next number. And it's generated a purchase order. I've not got approval switched on here, so it's not automatically going for approval. It's approved already. And if I look at the purchase order that's created here, as the screen opens here, we can see it's generated it for the right supplier. We can look now at the fact that it's actually generated it for the right product. And we can look and see the quantities that have come in. And also on the far right-hand side, you can start to see the prices that have been used and the expected receipt date. So one of the valuable things about the planning process is the ability to offset the lead times to make sure that you are ordering things with a view to make sure they come in for the right time to meet your customer demand. So that purchase order then effectively will now follow the similar route of any purchase order. Once it's approved, it can be sent out to the supplier through email or other methods that you may have in place. And then we can record receipts against that, and then following that, an invoice will come in, we can match against that, and ultimately the invoice will be paid. So that effectively rounds off the planning process for sort of a distribution item that we're buying in and selling, from demand planning, supply planning, to ordering the product through the order items workbench. So just go back to my slide. What we've just done here on the process is we've just really cut the purchase order. So as I mentioned, it will follow that particular flow all the way through. But really important that item 360 review, the parameters on that determine how supply is calculated. Okay, I'm just having a look for any questions that have been asked. Okay, one question about how items get added to the planning sheet. Any item that is flagged as a time-phased item will get added to the demand planning routine. That will also, and then the planning screens have got filters on them. So where I use the filter of, I think I used parent item as my filter, if that wasn't there, you'd be able to see all the planning items that are on there. So how items get on the planning sheet, they won't appear until you've made them time phased. And also, you've got to be careful that you're seeing the items that you want. I'm going to move slightly onto a slightly different subject and how we can vary the planning for those of you who might be involved with assembly or indeed more full-blown manufacturing capability. So I'm going to go back to my 360-degree view of a product. And at the top of the screen, assembly item, and that assembly item is made from a series of components. So as you're probably aware, NetSuite will enable you to set up bill of material structures, and you also can set up work orders to represent the manufacture or assembly of those particular items. So rather like the items that we're buying in, we have a series of settings on the location. So on the London location here, we've got a lead time for that particular item. And over on the far right-hand side here, we can see that the supply type is build. So what this means is that the normal way that we would supply that item is to build it ourselves. And to build it ourselves, we need to have components purchased or ingredients purchased, depending on your terminology, to make sure that they're in time, based on the lead time, to make the work order lead time. You can see here we've got the demand source forecast from demand plan. So again here I can control what the system anticipates as demand and what it uses as demand going forward. If I look at one of the components here and just click into one of the components that we have that is used to make the parent item here, again we have similar rules against the components. We can actually start to see well the components have a lead time, so effectively they have a three-week lead time. There's also a quantity of hand on those components, so planning will make sure that it takes into account what quantities you already have. And on the far right hand side we can see that it's just using it's going to raise purchase orders, and then look at any orders. So we'll look at any work orders for parents or where that component is used as a demand to make sure that you effectively back-to-backing your ordering of components with your manufacturing schedule of work orders in this particular case. So from that 360-degree view, we can generate a demand plan for the plans that I've already generated. Just using the menu this time, you'll see here that for this particular assembly, again I'm going to vary the time bucket. We're going to look at August onwards. So like before, I've chosen weekly buckets, and in this case I've put in a judgmental forecast. I've not used the system's capability to calculate. It's calculating come up with zero, but I'm putting in my own forecast there that will drive the demand. So what happens now when I run this is the planning engine will look at my rules, will look at the demand against the parent item, and it will blow that forward down to the component level. If I look at my item supply plan, I can see here that my assembly item, we've got work orders generated. So this could be your production schedule in terms of assembling or manufacturing those items, and it's generated me some planned orders. So rather like the purchase order side that I showed earlier, that can generate you a planned work order that you can go through the same process. Do you want to change the quantity? Do you want to release it now or later? And because I've created a supply of work orders for my top level item, that's created dependent demand down to the component level. It's cascaded that down. Now we've got recommendations to order the components in. And incidentally, if we have shared components, so often you've got common items that are used in lots of parents, it will do some aggregation here to make sure that the orders that you are creating are pegged to multiple parent items, so it will aggregate those items. So effectively it's blown through that demand that when we go into the workbenches now, we can raise purchase orders for the components, or we could raise work orders for the parent items to make sure that they're manufactured inside. So effectively, the process is pretty much the same as I showed earlier, but the slight variations are around the bit of material processing and both the dependent demand at the parent level and the dependent demand at the component level. But the nice thing is you can run that in one path and it will take the demand plan, push it through, and blow that right through your bit of material structure to give you your recommendations rather than having to do it in lots of different stages. And again, you can have safe searches and reports to pick up what those recommendations are. You can give them, due consideration before you convert that into your executable transactions, your purchase orders or your work orders. The other different angle of the planning is all around distribution resource planning, distribution requirements planning. So this is where your organisation may have parts of it, maybe a distribution centre that's supplying retail outlets or supplying another warehouse. So you can set up distribution networks in NetSuite which establish the relationships between those different locations. So, for example, your retail outlet may be supplied by your main distribution centre, and then the idea is then that any forecast that you put in against your retail outlets, your shops, or your distribution outlets, they will automatically get pushed back to your holding, your main hub warehouses. So effectively then the hub warehouses will generate transfers out to those retail outlets or shops. So how that looks on the system is we have a whole different range of setups that we can use for that. We can set up what we call a distribution network. So if you look here, I've got a retail distribution network. And what this means is that for certain subsidiaries in my company, and what I can't see, I can set up different categories of products. So this isn't done right at an item level. We could say, typically we could do this for families and products. We might get our backpacks sourced from, a warehouse in Europe. We might get a gloves coming in from a warehouse in the UK. So you can set up effectively what distribution. Yeah. And then we have and this is, we're actually receiving those from the retail distribution centre, and it takes us 2 days to a particular place, so we can build in some lead times for getting the product from the supplying internal warehouse to where it's ultimately going to be sold from. So when we look at, so if I look at another item here, so maybe I want to have a look at backpacks. We can start to see the backpacks again are supplied by transfer order from the retail distribution centre. So by establishing these relationships, what it means is that when we are setting up our product information, we link them to a particular distribution category, and that puts them into a bucket where we can look at some of these distribution network rules. So effectively, rather than a purchase order as a supply source or a work order, it becomes a transfer order, which actually means we're moving stock from one place to the other in our network. The benefit then of having a network means, obviously, you want to plan your distribution centre, your shop, any other nodes in your network at the same time. What it means then is that when we go to calculate the supply plan, we can plan through a distribution network. We have that option. Again, my security is stopping me. But when I click that button there, we'll be able to choose a group of locations rather than individual locations. Effectively, it means that you are running all your planning process at the same time and being coordinated with each other. So that distribution requirements planning feature was added into NetSuite demand planning, around a year or so ago. So we're continually, enhancing the product and, adding things to the capability. So just as a recap, what we've covered in the demonstration this afternoon has been a little bit of background about where demand planning fits in with the other tools that we have in NetSuite to make sure that we balance our inventory with our customer and demand requirements. We've looked at demand plans, which can be where we can get the system to statistically generate a forecast, or we can use our CRM data to generate a forecast, or we can bring in a forecasting spreadsheet that's been generated from an external system. Could be a spreadsheet, or you may have a specialist planning tool in place or a forecasting tool which gives you more modelling capabilities and graphical capability, and you just want to bring the finished forecast in. The supply plan capability enables you to translate that demand into a plan of, when do we need to organise our supply? Is it purchase orders, work orders, or transfer orders that we need to generate? The system takes the rules that you have, sets up against the product in the system, and will suggest to you a forward picture of what purchase orders or work orders or transfer orders you need to be putting in place and when, offset by the lead time, taking into account things like safety stock, and also providing warnings to you where things need to be rescheduled, moved out, moved in, or when you're going to run into situations where it can't do something, you've exceeded the lead time is too long to actually get the product in that you need. The execution against the plan is a closed loop, so the recommendations we can quickly convert using a workbench approach through flexible filters to actually convert those into a purchase order or work order without any rekeying, with the approvals that already exist in your business. And again, those of you who may be using optimized planning solutions, maybe that's the point that the recommendations come in and you effectively then flag them through there. And then some variations on planning around the manufacturing and DRP side. Manufacturing, where you suddenly start to use bill of materials, where you're blowing demand at one level down to the other level. You're looking at common components where you're aggregating demand together. So again, you can get some synergies there by making sure you're ordering the right quantities from the supplier, making sure that you're ordering them in the right time frame to get them in to make the parent items that you're manufacturing or assembling. And then the DRP or distribution resource planning angle as well is another capability where you can model distribution networks where you have internal supply points within your supply chain as well as external supply points, as well as perhaps manufacturing. And all that distribution network can be created across multiple locations and multiple legal entities or subsidiaries if you're sitting in a one-world environment. So all what you've seen today is core NetSuite. You can use the capabilities of safe searches and reporting and setting up reminders and things to add more value against that. It's an integrated solution, and the whole idea is really that you are holding less stock overall, but maintaining your customer service. So you'll keep making sure you've got the demand, stock in place at the right timing to make sure it's aligned with your demand. So thanks very much for attending the WebEx. I'm just checking the questions to see whether anybody's asked any questions. Just having a look at what we can fit in the next few minutes. Yes, we've had a question about the way the process is saying to generate work orders. So yeah, rather like there's an order item screen for the purchase items that you're buying, there is a mass work order creation screen, and what that does is it shows you all the work order recommendations, and you can choose to release them from that screen, effectively executing them in the same way. Okay, so another question, another comment really about purchase items and work order items. With problems with lead time and fixed order quantity, lead time seems to be quantity dependent and this caused swings in the quantity changes. Yeah, so there's a couple of things to make there. If you're using manufactured items, so it's a build supply type, you can have a fixed lead time, but there also is capability to have a variable lead time when you can put in a daily rate, the daily lead time for one unit of what you're producing. So what happens with this is it will tend to increase the lead time when you're making a lot of the stock, or decrease the lead time when you're making a smaller amount of stock to try and represent the manufacturing. So again, it harks back to the rules in terms of how you set up. I found sometimes that, you know, if you get one rule wrong, it can alter what you get straight away. So you do need to work, you know, on modelling it in the best way. It just creates your recommendation. In some situations, it's not ideal. What I've done in some circumstances where you've got the system making you certain recommendations, you use save search and you maybe have some other calculations relating to the quantities. For example, I worked with somebody who wanted to optimise on container quantities, and they wanted to provide multiples in different units of measure, so we were able to do something with save searches around that. Just looking through again, we work in just in time. Do you think that demand planning will help us? Again, maybe if you work in weekly buckets, it may be that the system will help you, you know, order more frequently but smaller quantities, so that you're more in line. On the manufacturing side, again, some of these questions are quite client specific, so they probably need a more discussion. They're probably not as simple as my answers, but you know, that's something that we can discuss with account managers and other colleagues. Okay, can we specify to generate a plan only for the assembly? Our components are well stocked for the year, so I'm not concerned about its supply. Okay, that's a question that relates back to the demand source. So what you can do there is you can set your parent items so that they are the demand source is forecast, but if you don't put a demand source on your components, they won't see any demand, so it effectively won't blow through to the components or generate your recommendations. That's a situation where effectively you only want to control the top level of manufacture and don't want the system to blow down, as I demonstrated. Just summarising again, other questions. Somebody's raised a question here around the best way to record bad items received and need to return to vendor. Yeah, if you raise a vendor return through the system, it should be able to see that in the demand plan and anticipate that you're going to have some coming back on that. So again, I've not tested that out personally, that the detail. And then final question I'm going to address today, can demand plans be generated from purchase requisitions? At this stage, the way it works is that the demand plan creates a planned purchase order, which you then convert into a purchase order. At the moment, it doesn't go through the requisitions process. To use requisitions, you need to be licensed for advanced procurement, which is a fairly new module, but maybe in the future we'll see an option perhaps to push that recommended purchase in through the requisitions route, which can then become a purchase order in that way, but it's not standard at the bottom. So I hope that addressed some of the questions. If there are any outstanding, we will follow up following the event. So just back to some further information. If you are interested in demand planning, there is a really good summary sheet on the website. If you go to www.netsuite.com and look in the resources part of NetSuite, there's a data sheet for all the different areas of the product, and the one-on-demand planning just gives you a comprehensive summary of all the material there. If you'd like, as a follow-up, please, to listening, to complete a survey that we're sending you feedback. So any feedback welcome. We use this to work out what we're going to be doing in the future. And as an incentive for that, there is a prize draw, I've been told, on the feedback report, where there'll be a Bluetooth speaker going to the prize winner there of a lottery that we'll draw on the feedback. So if you'd like to do a feedback, you have a chance of winning a Bluetooth speaker. And also, our marketing team will be sending out a recording of this event, so you can go over it in your own time or share it with colleagues who missed the event. So just thanks again very much for attending, everybody, and I'm going to close the WebEx now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our web seminar for today. Thank you all for participating, and you may now disconnect.